podcasting from Portland East to Portland West, from Big Pine Key to Pacific Beach, and from San Juan to Guam. This is All Across America. All right, Mike Jones, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be on.
So you've been an auctioneer for nearly 50 years. You're the owner of two of the nation's largest auctioneer training schools, America's Auction Academy in Texas and the Worldwide College of Auctioneering in Iowa.
And
how'd you get started?
We bought
in the
another
business?
one, and now
you
we
bought another one.
Yes, we purchased Nashville Auction School last November, and
oh wow!
So yeah, we have 3 now.
Wow, how many students do you train a year?
Oh, we average anywhere from 25 to 30 per class, and we do 3 classes a year at each location.
Wow.
But we're getting ready. We just rolled out a new program that will greatly impact the number. We've always, let me give you a little history. So I attended auction school in 1978. And when we say I've been in and around the auction business, I became an auctioneer in 78, but I worked for an auctioneer for 2 years before. So that's 50 years.
What does it take to be an auctioneer? Is there a certain personality that lends itself to being a good auctioneer? When you see students, can you tell right away, hey, that person's going to be great, or that person, this might not be the right occupation for them?
Here's what's funny. People always say, you have to know when somebody's terrible. And I go, listen, some of the most successful auctioneers in the world don't call bids. They run auction companies. They need to know how to run an auction company. They need to know the process. They need to be exposed to everything. It's like I always said, I don't have to be the bid caller, but I have to hire good bid callers. I have to hire great staff. I have to have a great front office. I have to have a great back office. There's so many things involved in auctioneering that has nothing to do with calling a bid. It could be marketing and advertising. It could be technology today, because now we have online auctions,
right,
and we have hybrids of that. We have online only. We have live auctions. We have live with online auctions, and simulcast. What we're doing right now, I will tell you, I do some auctions for some auction companies where I sit in a conference room in my hometown here of McKinney, Texas, and I will call the bids, and I'll liquidate a manufacturing facility in about 4 or 5 hours, online and live. So people can bid with their mouse, or they can, in some cases, physically be there. A lot of mine, the people are not even in the facility where we're selling the equipment. They've already inspected it. They've looked at it. They've appraised it in their mind, what they want to give for it. And then they go back to their office or their farm or wherever they go and bid on the stuff there. So it's a very, I never thought I would buy in to this type of technology. But the technology is so advanced today. When I started out doing online auctions, I was one of the very first to do it way back in the 90s, early 90s. You have to put things in perspective. 1995, eBay was unveiled. That's how long they've been around, 1995. In 1997, I was already experimenting with online auctions. But
you're a pioneer.
But it was expensive. So I go to Mississippi. I went to Macomb, Mississippi, and I did.
I know Macomb. Yes, we had a guest on, Mr. Sip, who's actually has a gospel blues or trail marker in Macomb, Mississippi.
Really?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Do you know who Jerry Clower is?
I don't know the name. No.
Okay, I'm going to challenge all of your viewers to look up Jerry Clower. He was one of the most famous country-related. When I say country, he traveled in the United States and abroad, but he was a comedian, funny guy, but he was very relatable. I mean, but he was. Some people would think he was a hick, but he wasn't. He was brilliant. a lot of people, there's a lot of people like that. That's their stick. Jerry
Yes.
Clower was a funny comedian. He'd be like on the Grand Ole Opry, or he'd be on country radio, and he was just a great storyteller. And but Jerry Clower was from Macomb, Mississippi, so he's
Southern
kind of like your
Mississippi.
son. Yeah, so I go there to liquidate a collection of antiques and collectibles, and I was approached by a new company that is no longer in business um, to do an online auction. I said, "Well, how many people in Mississippi own a computer?" This is in 1997. They were not
Right.
like, and computers were just not as accepted, period. I mean, I worked for an auction company here in Dallas in the 90s, early 90s, and we were selling new and reconditioned computers. I was selling reconditioned computers, and I'm not talking laptops. Laptop did not exist. We're talking, the big boxes with the hard drive and the monitors that took two guys to carry, and it's
The boat
ridiculous.
anchors.
We were selling those for $16, $18, $2,200 for a
Yeah.
refurbished,
Refurbished.
refurbished computer. And the guys were making millions and millions of dollars, and I would go sell them right across the street from Texas Stadium. That's where their place was.
Okay.
So I'd walk out of the auction house. There was no online auctions at that time, and we'd do $2 million in computers. There were refurbs, which was crazy, and we would sell components and all that stuff. But anyway, that's my history going back in the early 90s on computers.
Wow.
But I knew it was coming. I bought my first computer, if you can imagine this, for my auction company in 1985. That was my first purchase. There was no software. If you didn't have a developer that could build the software. So I spent $12,000 on a compact computer, and all it would do is labels. It was the most expensive label making machine in America, I'm telling you right now. But I wanted to be on the cutting edge, right?
Yeah.
I've always
Yeah.
tried to do that. So anyway, the hybrid method is going to open up the opportunity for more and more people to be in the auction industry. Plus, you have to understand that only half of the United States is a licensed law state. So if you live in California, or if you live in Oregon or somewhere out in the West, you would come to auction school basically to learn the business or learn to chant. So we're offering different types of classes. We offer classes that are just about the chant. So if you already are a smart guy and knows how to run their business, or a lady, and you just want to learn to chant, we've got a place for you. If you want to learn the business, you've got that opportunity too. So we have become the one-stop shop for anything auction education related. And we
And I
also
think that's
have.
what
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Well, I was just thinking, most people, when they think of an auctioneer, it is the chant and only the
Yes.
chant, and they
Right.
don't think of everything else that goes into an auction itself. I mean,
They don't.
what are the components of an auction? How does it go from somebody gives you a call to, everything is sold? What does that look like?
I have a major oil company that called me about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and out of the blue, and said, "Mr. Jones, we would like to liquidate 8 facilities across the United States, all of our yards." I said, "Okay." So I said, "Well, first thing, I've got to go look." He said, "Well, I've got pictures." I said, "Well, you probably don't have pictures of everything, and you probably, we don't know what the limitations are going to be for the locations." So there's things we have to consider when we do an auction. First off, I'm going to go look at the asset so I can determine whether I want to go to the location. And if I go to the location, I got to decide if I want to do a live auction or an online only auction, because sometimes the facility just does not lend well to the public. It's not good. It doesn't have any parking. It's in a bad part of town. It's a security problem. It could be any number of things that determine. Maybe it's just in a hot building. I mean, the last thing I want to do is drag a crowd of people into a warehouse in West Texas in July, August, and kill them.
They're not going to stick around.
They're not going to. And see, that's another thing you bring up. They're not going to stick around. When I started in the auction business in 78, 79, I could start an auction in 1980. I could start an auction at 9:00 in the morning and go 24 hours straight and have a
Wow.
crowd. Still have 50 to 100 people at 6:00 in the morning. Insane. It sounds insane. And they go, that's impossible. Well, it's not. And I'll tell you why. I was selling retail stores. And so I would go into a small town and I'm selling bicycles and tires and washers and dryers and refrigerators. And those people want to buy that stuff. There were no malls. There were no cell phones. There were no
Sure.
computers. There were only 3 TV channels. They may have had a public television. Maybe there's a 4th channel, but there were only 3 channels. People today have no reality, especially the young people. They have no reality what we dealt with 40 years ago. So 45 years ago, 3 TV channels, no mall, nowhere to go, And if you went, we were entertaining. See, that's the other thing. Auctions are entertaining.
They are.
We create fun. That's why I always took a lot of pride in my crew. I hired the very best people. I would always hire the best backup auctioneer, I'd sell a lot, but I wouldn't sell the whole thing. We would alternate. And then you bring in some ringmen. Ringmen are people that stand there and kind of promote the product, so to speak, get the crowd riled up and take the bids.
Hype man.
Hype man. That's a good description. And so they would help secure bids, and I'd have 2, 3, 4 of those. And then you'd have to have a clerk. So anyway, we go out, we take a look at the prospective auction, and then I report back to the seller and I say, okay, we want to do whatever type of auction we want to do. For example, I have one next month in Midland, Texas, and it's farm equipment. And it's the base of the sale is a family-owned farm that's been in their family for forever. And the patriarch was killed in a plane crash.
Oh.
And so the kids were like, we don't know what to do about the farm. Neither one of us really want to run it. One brother does and one brother doesn't. And then they got to deal with a oil company. And in West Texas, other than oil, the most valuable asset is water. And so they have water. And so they're making like $5,000 to $10,000 a day selling water to oil companies. They said, let's get out of the farming business. It's a non-producer. It just takes up, it just costs money, more money to operate it than it's worth. And they were a big provider of food, certain types of food products to some of the Texas grocery stores. So, I mean, they had a decent business, but when you're making $5,000 to $10,000 a day on water,
kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to go liquidate those assets next month, in about a month, and then we're taking some consignments, and what that means is if you're a neighbor and you have a tractor and you want to sell it, we'll accept it for the auction, and then we'll sell that for you too as well. We might have 50 items that we sell as a consignment in that auction to build it up. We're not looking for bad product. We're looking for good product. I don't even like the word junk. There's 2 words that I don't use in auction school to describe anything, and that's junk and cheap. So when we're on the microphone, the rule of thumb is we do not use the word junk and we do not use the word cheap. Because if I'm standing there and selling your assets, let's say I'm selling your farm. The last thing a seller wants to hear the auctioneer say are those 2 words. Well, that's too cheap.
Emotions.
It's not bringing enough money. And oh, by the way, all right, I'm going to sell this pile of junk here. You've just described their product. Well, somebody out there is going to buy it. You hope, right? So here
Another
again,
man's
we become
treasure, as they say.
oh, it's great stuff. It's great stuff because there's one man. What do they say? One man's junk is one man's treasure,
Yep.
and that's about the way it is. It really is that way. I mean, we all there's something for everybody. There's something for everybody, and I've known all these people because in 50 years I've got customers that I knew would literally buy anything, anything. I've got one over here about 30, 40 miles from me to the west. And I know that if I needed to sell it, all I'd have to do is pick up the phone and say, hey, this is what I have. You want to buy it? And he goes, yeah, I'll come get it. So it may not bring a lot of money if it's something that's less desirable for the rest of the world, but for that guy, but if you go to his property, you're going to go, oh my God, it's like the ultimate.
I bet.
It's like American Pickers goes bad.
Right, right, right. So
When we
what
go to
what are you
yeah,
what are the most common things that you are selling? I mean, traditionally people think of cattle, real estate, art, charity. What you mentioned manufacturing facilities, farms. Is it all of the above? Has it changed over the years?
I've sold it all.
Yeah.
Literally, when you get out of auction school, unless you have a place to go right out of auction school, or you have a family member that owns the local sale barn for cattle, or they sell farm equipment, there are people like that get to leave auction school and they go right into the family business.
Mhm.
That's not the average person. Average person today is living in an apartment in a suburb of Dallas, trying to figure out what they're going to do. They're looking for a change of life, and that is the gross reality. Um, you know, I've had NASA scientists. This is no kidding. I've had NASA scientists. I've had doctors. I've had retired dentists. People that have already done something else. For me, I came home. I was 19. I was in the service station business back when gasoline. In fact, I owned my service station when we had the gasoline shortage back in 1979. There were lines to buy gasoline. It was a full service station. I owned a Texaco, ultimately owned a Texaco and two Exxons in my hometown. And then got so busy in the auction business, I just had to let them go. I couldn't stay in that business. But I immediately did not have a solution on what I was going to do. And I thought, you know what? I discovered that a consignment auction would be the best thing for me to do because all I got to do is go out and get 10 people or 15 people to give me something to sell. And I had the remnants of my grandfather's estate, that things that were left after the family got what they wanted. I went in and cleaned the house out and the garage out. We made that the base of the sale. Then I met a guy in auction school that happened to be from here in Texas. I actually met one guy that I ended up going to take the state tests with him. He hooked me up with another guy, and it's all about who you know. Like in any business or anything in life, it's who you meet and who you know, and hopefully they'll embrace you. So they had new furniture to sell, they had tools, and they had all this stuff. So they brought all this stuff in. We had a big auction, and that was my first one. So at the end of the sale, this old man comes up and he says, "Hey, my sister's estate is here in town. Would you be interested in taking a look at it to sell it?" I said, "Sure." I said, "As soon as the sale's over, I'll be down there." So I go meet him, and it's about, I don't know, 10 blocks away. That was my next sale. That sale, an old man came up and he says, "Hey, I've got a collection of stuff down in Bridgeport, Texas. Would you be interested?" I said, "Absolutely." The next week, I was going to Henrietta, Texas, up near Wichita Falls. And I'm telling you that it just steamrolled from there and kept going. I went to auction school thinking I was going to be the biggest thing in antique auctions, period, like an antique gallery, because I worked for one in high school in Houston for a couple of years. And I did do some antiques for a couple of years. And then my stepfather had attended an auction in Louisville, Texas, which is about 20 miles west of here, and they were liquidating a Western auto store. People that are watching this, the bulk of this society today doesn't know what Western auto is. they would be familiar with Advanced Automotive, which is an auto parts store. Well, that is the remnants of Western Auto, but Western Auto was a 100-year-old company that started in the early 1900s as like a mom pop Walmart. And Western Auto was based out of Kansas City. They were liquidating stores because Walmart was opening a new store left and right. And as soon as Walmart opened a store, everything else went out of business. The tire stores in town went out of business. The retail stores like the home appliance store, anything Walmart sold killed every little town in the United States. They just did. Well, as that happened, my stepfather had given them my information and said, hey, we'd be interested in selling stores for you. So here I am. I'm 20 years old. I'm calling these guys at corporate and I'm saying, hey, I'm Mike Jones. I'm interested in selling your stores. And they're going like, yeah, well, not right now. We have an auctioneer. Okay. I called him every month. Every month I'd call this guy up. I'm wearing him down. You know, they say you got to make at least 12 calls to get any sale. Well, I think it was more like more than that, but it wasn't very long, about a year into it, because my stepfather said, you've got to call this guy. And I had this guy's card and I called him. His name was Joe Dungan. He was from down around, he was in Temple, Texas. That's where their distribution center was. He was over wholesale credit. I learned a lot at a very young age about business. And I called him one day and I said, hey, this is Mike Jones, because he'd always just kind of blow me off. He's like, okay, kid, I got your number. I'll call you if I need you. But I'd call anyway. And I'd say, hey, Joe, I apologize for bothering you. But he always would take my call. And then one day he says, hey, I might have a sale for you out in Stanford, Texas, out in West Texas. And I said, I want it. He said, well, I'm talking to my auctioneer. He says he might be able, he may not be able to do it. And I said, okay, well, if he's not available, I want the auction. He hung up the phone, calls me back in 5 minutes. And he said, I'm sorry. His name was Jack Fawkes. He's been deceased for many years, but very well-known auctioneer out of Lubbock, Texas. And he says he's going to do the auction. I said, man, that's a bummer. And he said, I know, I'm sorry. And then he goes, he said, I do have a little bitty store over in East Texas, in Van, Texas, outside of Tyler. I'm not sure you'd be interested in it because it's so small. I said, I'll take it. He said, you don't even know what it is. I said, I don't care. I want to do it. And he says, all right. I said, how much inventory do you have? And he said, it shows $16,000. And he had already told me that the store in Stanford had $35,000 worth of assets in it at wholesale. And I ended up doing that store. And my $16,000 store brought more than his $35,000 store. And he called me the next week and he said, you want to do another one? I said, yeah. And he said, you're going to Mahia, Texas. And I said, okay. Mahia, it looks like Mexia, Texas. That's how it's spelled. But it's yes. Mahia. So I went to Mahia, Texas. It did $55,000. 2 weeks later, I was in Port Lavaca, Texas. It brought $72,000. And for the next 20 years, on average, I did a Western Auto store every week for 20 years.
That's quite an account right there.
That was the mother right there. And that was the one that got me really started. And I was only, 20, 21 years old. And I was doing a radio show too. I was writing the news at a small 500-watt radio station, dusk to dawn. And you know what that means. It's a very low-end station in a little bitty town in Texas. And I was doing the morning drive, and I was a disc jockey and did a morning show. And I was learning a lot of things that I didn't even know I was learning. I got really good on the microphone because, as in radio or television, you learn to do that. I lived on a dairy farm, man. I was not, and I was a very shy kid. I was a very shy kid living on a dairy farm. So anyway, that got me going. Next thing, then what would happen is I would go to these small towns and I'd sell the Western Auto store. And then whoever owned the True Value hardware store would come over and say, hey, we're thinking about retiring. Because it was mostly older owners. And then Firestone. and then Ace Hardware, and then the Rexall drugstore. I mean, every business that was affected by Walmart became my target. Lumber yards.
Wow.
And I ended up selling 14 Lowe's stores. When they came to Texas, it didn't work. And I liquidated 14 Lowe's stores. You know, people can't even believe that they were having auctions to liquidate stores. But in 1988, I sold 14 of them. And we were also going through a recession at that time. But I've had a lot of cool experiences and opportunities to sell everything. So fast. I also had gotten my real estate license around 1983, getting ready to sell real estate. And so I would do the farm. I would sell the property and everything on the farm. So now I've got my real estate license. Then by chance, a guy that came to my auction school was from Houston, and he said, "Hey, Mike," and he was an insurance adjuster. He said, "I have a friend of mine with Textron Finance in Georgia, and they've got an asset down in Baton Rouge." I said, "What is it?" He says, "It's a big grocery store." He said, "It's a chain of grocery stores." And he said, "But they have this one in Baton Rouge and they want to sell everything in it." I said, "How many square feet?" He says, 300,000 feet. I said, "That's a big grocery store. That's like a Walmart. That's like a Costco."
Yeah.
And I go down there, I meet this guy, and the people I meet are phenomenal. I meet this guy, he's an appraiser, right? But he's from San Francisco. His father had been the commandant at the San Francisco Yacht Club. He had been the commandant, and he was from San Rafael, and we became buddies. And he was just there to show me the assets. He said, "You really," and I was doing it for a leasing company out of California. He said, "No, you really ought to go down to New Orleans." I said, "Why?" He said, "They've got 14 more stores." And so I said, "Noted." And I got in my rental car and I drove to New Orleans. I go in this building. See, God's taking care of me. I'm going to tell you right now, I give all the glory to God because I have been taken care of my whole life. And it's amazing. I could write a story about it. I go into this old dilapidated corporate office of a company called Schwegman. If you look Schwegman Grocery up, they were the oldest family-owned grocery chain in the United States, in New Orleans, going back to 1875. So they had a brilliant history. I go in there. I go up the elevator. The elevator breaks down. I'm stuck in the elevator for a while. Then they come get me out. I go into this guy's office. There's nobody there because they're in bankruptcy. I meet the trustee. I said, "Hey, nice to meet you, Tom." His name was, Tom. So I said, we just have a conversation. I'm a conversation guy. I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Oh, I'm from Texas." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Where?" He said, "Well, I used to be the president of Tom Thumb Foods, which is a chain here in Texas, and they also are a part of another chain." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I left there." He said, "I'm a trustee." And I said, "Well, tell me more about you." See, I want to learn something about them. I want something to connect me to the people I talk to. He said, "Yeah." He said, my family's from St. Joe, Texas." I said, "You're what?" I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." Well, that was where my mother was born. My
Oh, wow.
grandfather, we're talking about a town of maybe 1,200 in the middle of, it's on the Chisholm Trail. And, I'm telling you, there's nothing there. There's a Dairy Queen that my cousin operated for 50 years, right? I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe that." He said, "Yeah." He said, my family, my dad used to be the superintendent of schools in Sanger, Texas." I said, "Dude,
Mm.
I bank in Sanger, Texas." I mean, everything was copacetic. Everything just
Yeah.
fit. I had banked in that town since the early 80s. And now here I am with a guy. Listen, when you get those connections, you don't have to sell yourself. I sold myself by meeting the guy. We immediately connected. I signed a contract for 14 stores. I liquidated those over a 2 or 3 month period. So now I'm in the commercial liquidation business of the commercial assets. Well, Textron Finance had the note on a lot of it, and GE Capital as well. These are the two largest companies in America related to commercial asset leasing and financing. Next thing I know, I'm selling a defense plant in Petaluma, California. I'm
Wow.
selling Cushman Motor Scooter plant, which became Easy Go. I liquidated their plant in Lincoln. I was in New York. I mean, literally all over the United States, Canada, Mexico, and selling assets. And this, of course, during a time when a lot of manufacturing was going offshore, and I was selling a lot of it offshore. Nokia cell phone manufacturing facility in Gilbert, Arizona. I guess my point is I've sold everything. At one point, I sold pedigreed horses, did the pedigrees for horses in various locations. But really, my heart was in hard assets and real estate. So then in 2006, I joined a company. I've been running my own company for 30 years. I get a call from a guy uh, with a company called United Country Real Estate. He lives here in Dallas. He said, I'd like to hire you. And I said, well, I would not be a good employee. I said, I've been my own boss for 30 years. I'm not going to be really good at this. And he goes, no, you don't understand. He said, I want you to start an auction division within United Country Real Estate. And I want to inject auctions into all 400 plus of our offices because they're a franchise. So all these, and they specialize in rural real estate, rural recreational real estate. So if you've got a lake house or if you've got any property in a small town, that's where they're located. So that's what we did. We set out in 2006, and we built $1 billion asset inside of United Country Real Estate, which is now United.
Wow.
It's United Country Real Estate, but we created United Country Auction Services, and I was with them for about 13 years, and it was phenomenal. Had a phenomenal success, and then I was still running my auction schools. I was training all of the people at these real estate offices at my school. That was part of the deal. We're going to inject them into our schools, so it was kind of a win-win. And so I had been concentrating. I still concentrate on manufacturing facilities, commercial assets, some farm sales, but not very many, if it's the right fit. And then real estate, all types of real estate. I've sold commercial property in Houston. I've sold commercial property everywhere. So,
How
yep.
much about these items do you need to know to be a good auctioneer?
You need to know everything you can possibly educate yourself on. It's kind of like doing a podcast. You want to know who you're talking to. And that's really what it is. By working in a state or an antique auction gallery, you had to know about those assets. If I'm selling a national brass cash register from 1900, you should know about everything you can about it. If you can find out, see, here's what people have going for them today that we didn't have going for us. I can get on the computer. I can do my research. I can look up every type of, I can take a photo of every tractor in America and do AI. It'll build my catalog. That's what these people have going for them.
All right.
So they don't even have to do it. And if you ask them what's it worth, it'll give you an opinion. Is it always right? No, it's not. So you really you do other research too. You look at other websites, other sales companies, other auction companies, other auction results. If I'm going to do high end assets that paintings, I may go out to Highland Park, Texas, which is the most expensive zip code outside of Houston. Highland Park and Preston Hollow Preston Hollow is where President Bush lives. He retired to Preston Hollow in the Highland Park area. That's where you'll find him at restaurants because the Bush Library is here. But that area, if I go in there, that's where the high dollar estates are. That's where the Jerry Joneses and the Troy Aikmans, and they all live there. Yeah. So if there's an estate sale and you go in there and you're looking at paintings, that I'm probably not going to sell that painting. I'm probably going to consign it to a specialty art house. I'm going to be the middleman. I'm going to make a recommendation. I'm going to pick the venue that I think is the best one. It's probably going to go to New York. I'm probably going to deal with Christie's. I'll negotiate the commissions for Christie's or Sotheby's or any of the big art houses. So I'm just saying it. You also have to know, you have to be smart enough when you analyze a sale. Am I the best person for this job? Am I the best? Because I can tell you many times, more than likely, I'll partner with somebody. I brought in partners before where buy the whole deal. I'll literally go in and buy the whole manufacturing facility. And if I do that, I'm going to bring in an appraiser, because he knows all the equipment currently. That's a real advantage. If you have somebody that's really smart about equipment, they know everything there is, and they know everybody who buys and sells it. I was
Right.
in San Francisco last month looking at a chemical plant to liquidate a whole plant. We're not talking about a minor thing. We're talking about a plant that's been there for 50, 60 years. It's not a big secret. The community knows that it's going to be liquidated. They've already started the process. Well, they're going to sell it, and we're going to be involved in it in some form or fashion. It was a lead that came in from a guy that I met, but if I do it, I'm not doing it by myself. I'm going to bring in. I like to have partners, and I like to spread the wealth around. I would rather split a deal 3 ways and maximize the return than do it myself, and it comes in at 50% of what it should bring. I like people that specialize, and I think that's the key is knowing your product, whatever it is. And I could write a book about that.
And how do you as an auctioneer, I mean, I guess one of the art is coming up with the starting bid, but how do you then build that excitement so people are bidding up the product?
Well, if you're doing a live auction, the way that I come up with let me give an example. If I've got an item and the estimated value is 10,000 to 15,000, the first thing out of my mouth is going to be 15,000 or higher.
I see.
Because here's the deal. Everybody's got the same information I do. We're not, we don't have the advantage today of people not having an idea of what something is worth. Today, they can get on the internet and they already know that the estimated value of that item is 10 to 15 grand. Okay. And it usually depends on condition. What is it? If you're buying a baseball card, take a look. There's millions and millions of baseball cards. I'm a card collector. I got 1 million of them over here in a container. I haven't seen them in 30 years. Okay. I don't have time to look at baseball cards. But if I was selling them, I would get somebody in here. I know the good cards. I'd have to have them graded. And, if it's a highly graded card, that's why a Mickey Mantle in a certain condition brings $1 million. And then another one brings, $50. Yeah. It's all about condition. Well, the same thing goes for any asset, whether it's a tractor or a piece of manufacturing equipment. It's all about condition and make, model, serial number. That's why it's so it's interesting. If you follow Barrett Jackson or Mecum, these classic car auctions that are on television, they have their own TV shows now. And they didn't have that 30, 40 years ago. Now you can watch classic car auctions 24 hours a day. Learn all you want to. You can see a car literally go up for sale in Monterey, California, and then show up at Mecum or one of the other auctions and watch it. Well, it went out there for 50,000 or 100,000, and they didn't accept the bid. It was a no sale. 3 months later or 6 months later, it's showing up at another auction in New York, and it may sell, it may not sell. But you can track a lot of these assets by serial number to know. You can learn the history on an item very quick. I went down to Houston a 3 weeks ago. I was going down there to buy a tractor. And I'm talking about a little antique tractor, about a 1942, 43, 8-in Ford tractor, because that's what we rode around on the dairy farm about an hour from here. And I always wanted one. I always thought they were cool. And of course, ours was rough. I mean, it's post-war time, and it's just a working tractor. Well, there's a lot of them still out there, but I wanted one in mint condition or as close to it. So I find this one on the internet, and I call this lady up. And actually, no, I didn't even talk to her. We did it all through the internet. She wanted $6,000 for it. And I said, well, I'm thinking 4, She said, okay, come get it. There was no negotiation.
Wow.
That's why I like auctions, because you put it in an auction, it has a chance to accelerate. It doesn't decelerate. It's going to go up, most likely. It's not going to go down. And if it does go down, it's going to hit where it's supposed to be. But This was like a real quick negotiation. 6,000. No. Okay. Well, I'll give you 4. Okay. Come get it. And I
Wow.
wondered
All right.
why. I wondered why. I couldn't understand why. And she goes, I want it out of it's in an airplane hangar. And she said, we've got to get it out of there because I've got an airplane that we need to put in it. Well,
Fair enough.
when you're dealing with airplanes, you obviously have a higher uh, financial level than the average guy selling a tractor, right? So I get
Probably.
there and I meet this guy. It was a great experience. I love this guy. And he really didn't care. He didn't care what he got for it. But here was the cool thing. I go in to look at this tractor and there's a biplane in the back of the hangar, like a killer Stearman, which is, it's a biplane from, I don't know, 1940s. I think it was 40s. Could have been 30s. I'm not sure. And I said, man, that's a killer plane. And he said, yeah, I know. He said, there's a lot of history about that plane. And I said, well, tell me more about it. I like the plane. And so he's like, that plane, he said, came from California. It was given to a friend after another guy passed away. And then they offered it to me because my friend passed away suddenly. I said, really? I said, who originally had it? He said, Steve McQueen.
Oh, wow.
I said, Steve McQueen. He said, yeah. I said, wow. And they said, yeah. In fact, when he passed away, they took his ashes up in this biplane and spread his ashes with this plane. And he said, which was very unfortunate for the guy in the back seat. And it was a true story. The guy in the front seat let go of the ashes and just covered up the guy in the back seat. But anyway, and then he showed me the pictures. And so they're on my Facebook page. There's pictures of that airplane and about 4 or 5 pictures of Steve McQueen. So anyway, it was awesome. And I told him, I said, well, if you decide to sell it, let me know. Someday he will sell it. Right now he's not going to, but I guarantee you he will sell that airplane and I'll probably get that phone call. Do I need a biplane? No. Can I fly? No. But do I know someone that can fly me around in it? Yes. So I bought the tractor and brought it back to and it's right behind me in my party barn. So it's really cool.
You ever find it hard that you're dealing with a lot of businesses that are going out of business with estates or people passing away? There is some hardship around auctions often. What are your feelings around that?
I've always said in auction school, since I teach it, I tell them, I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is not auction school. We are not an auctioneering school. Which they're like, what? I go, I run a life school. It's about life. We honor our veterans when they come to auction school. We honor our first responders. It's not terribly uncommon to see me do the Pledge of Allegiance. I open every beginning of a school and end the school with a prayer. You won't see that in public schools, and you'll never see that at a college if it's not a Christian college here in the United States or something similar to it. You're just not going to see that. I try to teach compassion, understanding. What are the sellers going through? We're dealing with people who are in bereavement. We've got people that are literally losing their minds over what they're having to deal with. Some of them are suicidal. I won't lie to you. I've gone in my third Western auto store that I ever sold. The one common theme about the location was all the beer cans underneath the shelving because the guy had become an alcoholic. There's a lot of distress. I always say that even though not legally, and we cannot profess to give legal advice because we're not attorneys, but we are in our own way a part-time attorney because we're always preparing contracts and we're asking them to get them reviewed. When you've been in it 50 years, we're always changing the contracts to fit the situation. Life changes. 9/11 changed contracts forever. I had 3 auctions scheduled for the week of 9/11. I had to cancel them all. We had the provision for what happens in the case of a catastrophic event like 9/11. All of those kinds of things feed into it. You're dealing. I always say we're part-time psychologists. Yeah. And we're part-time psychologists. We sit down with a grieving widow. See, when I go look at an auction, it's not a 10-minute conversation. It's a 2-hour conversation. I go in and I say, look, I'm not in a hurry. You're my only client right now. So if you'd like to sit down and drink a cup of coffee, and let's do that. Or if you'd like to, and when we get through looking at it, we'll sit down. If they've got time, I'll sit down with them. You know what? Sometimes that's all it takes. Number one, to create a relationship. Number two, get the auction. And then the other thing is, this is kind of morbid, but it really isn't, because it's just life. I have a lot of friends that are in the funeral home business, and I've actually had funeral homes hire me to liquidate estates because they had no heirs. There was nobody, and I had one lady in my early life, my first real estate auction, the very first one, was an auction from a funeral home where they said that she had willed everything she had to the funeral home to cover the cost of her funeral. And, which was very sad when you think that, it wasn't a big estate, and we sold the real estate too. I mean, they got a lot of money, and they didn't give her a funeral worth that much money. But that's another source of business. And I treat my clients like the guy that you have to deal with at the funeral home, with compassion, care, understanding. And I was one of my best subjects in college. I was a terrible student my freshman year in college because I was miserable. I wanted to be out doing business. My body and soul were all about running a business. I was raised and geared to run a business. I couldn't wait to get out of that place and go do business. And so after the first year, I went to auction school, and then I went back to college, which was really funny because within 2 years I went back to college and I took all my accounting classes, all my real estate classes, psychology, and psychology was one of my best classes. So I think you have to be really good with people, but then you need to be tough when you're negotiating, and you have to be tough with corporate guys. I've been hired by Ross Perot, and I've always said, if you can do 1 or 2 sales for Ross Perot, I've already had my doctorate, man. I'm a professor, David.
Yeah.
So, but it's true. I mean, I've worked for a lot of major corporations all over the world. So,
do you recommend that, particularly with family businesses, with estates, that the family stay away from the auction, or do they often attend? I mean, I just feel like it can get very emotional.
It's a great question. I think you pick it up really quick by the conversations you have, whether they need to be there or not. If they're overly emotional, you really don't want them there. The problem is in small town America, a lot of times the auction is like a family reunion, especially if they big families. You got 12 kids. They all want to buy something to grandma's. You see, I always say, don't spread the stuff. Don't give away all the good stuff and then try to have an auction and expect to get a good amount of money. Just sell the whole damn thing and let all the relatives come and buy whatever they want. And that way, and everybody gets a piece. So if they're going to get 1/12 of the estate, they can spend their 1/12 on items. I tell you what, it makes for a whole lot better auction. It's a lot more entertaining. But if somebody is the worst thing I ever had to happen was in Prentiss, Mississippi. I was doing a Western auto store. They'd been running the store for 50 years, and here they go. They show up with lawn chairs and set the chairs down in the middle of the room where I'm trying to conduct the auction. And they're listening, they're watching and listening, and people are walking up and they're patting them on the back and telling them how sad it is that they're going out of business. And it just drags them down. It kills the deal.
Yeah. Oh, that's tough. That's tough. Yeah. I mean, and what are some of the, you talk about psychology. What are some of the main teachings, even some of the surprising teachings that you tell your students?
Oh, I don't know. It's hard to think about that. Some of the teachings that I have, I think, put yourself in their position, of your seller. You need to understand. I think the key is understanding what the goal is. And I think any professional auctioneer would tell you, you've got to know what the goal is. Why are they having a sale? Yeah. Because you're going in thinking one thing, and then there's a whole different reality to it. There's an underside to every story. The underside is that the brother and the sister hate each other, and one of them wants to win. They want the other one to lose. That's an extreme, but it's a real thing. I've dealt with it
Yeah.
on all levels. Corporations, uh, sometimes they just want it out. They'll say, "Well, we want 50,000 for it, and we just want to sell it to somebody." And I'd go in and I'd buy the whole thing, and negotiations are part of it. Well, then later on you find out they would have given you the whole thing just to haul it off because they needed the building. Like in
Yeah.
30 days, they want everything out. Now you're sitting there paying them 50,000 that you didn't really want to spend and you
Right.
didn't need to
They'd
spend because
almost
they
pay
would have
you.
given. I was told that. I was told that. I bought a deal one time and it wasn't a lot of money, but he said, Mike, we'd have just given it to you. I'm going, well, hell. That's what the banker told me. He said, you wouldn't have had to pay for it at all. He said, we just needed the building empty. I said, well, so noted.
Yeah. You hear some of these stories on the internet where, family farm, they can't make the payments to the bank and it gets foreclosed and then it goes to a local auction and all the farmers from around the town are at the auction and they make an opening bid. The family places the opening bid and all of the other farmers refuse to bid and it goes for that one single bid. Does that story sound right to you? Have you seen that happen?
It's a true story. It has happened. It's happened in the Midwest, the upper Midwest. That's an Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois kind of story. There were a lot of movies made in the 80s about those situations. And the auctioneer shows up with the banker and they drive up and they get out of the car and everybody and naturally they have the auctioneer in a black trench coat and a black hat.
Right. The Grim Reaper, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, there may have been some of that, and there has been some. I know for a fact it's happened. I just lost a friend in Arkansas, and he had a similar situation where there were very unhappy family members, and they made it. And the locals were just like screw the bank,
Yeah.
we'll give $1, that kind of deal. It's happened.
Yeah.
It has not happened like as much as they make it out. I think they
Sure.
were trying to provoke a lot of people also, of course, Farm Aid and all that stuff. And I understand Willie Nelson, and I've been seeing him half a dozen times. I love the guy, but Farm Aid is only helpful in certain areas. But if you start creating hate between lenders and people that need the money, that's a problem, and that did happen. But here's the deal: the reality is, in 2026. The local people don't have the power that they used to have. The local banker doesn't have the power because the advertising goes out worldwide, nationwide, and now the farm goes up for sale, and a doctor in Chicago buys it for 3 times what the local people pay.
Wow. Yeah.
That's fact. That's a fact. That's why that's not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons that the real estate in the Midwest and all the Iowa farms and Kansas farms, Missouri farms, that's why that stuff is just over the top. These lands are being bought up left and right. A lot of it's been bought up by big time investors, and that's the unfortunate thing too. I mean, we're because we do a great job marketing and advertising. It's also it's created a lot of wealth for a lot of the farmers who decide to finally sell their land. But it also takes it out of private hands and puts it into corporate America. And listen, as much as I'm a capitalist and free enterprise guy, and I preach it every day, and I believe in it. It disturbs me when we lose control of our lands, and whether it's Bill Gates or the Chinese or someone like that. I think you're going to see a lot of pushback. But we're in a weird America these days. That flag doesn't mean what it meant even 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know who's going to fight for this country, but I will. I will. My friends will.
Well, speaking of the goodness in all of us, charity auctions. Do you do some of those?
I've done the biggest. I've done some of the best. I've done the largest. I used to do the largest American Cancer Society fundraiser in America.
Oh, wow.
Here in Dallas. It's called the Cattle Barons Ball. It was kind of made. It wasn't because of the TV show Dallas, but it's kind of a knockoff. The TV show Dallas kind of embraced that whole deal. So in the mid '80s, not the mid '80s, but like I think it was in the mid to late '70s. There was a friend of mine named Jackie Wynn, and she wanted to raise money for American Cancer, and so she got the rich ladies in Dallas and Highland Park together. They were all oil people and others that had a lot of money, and they created a fundraiser. They hired Johnny Cash to be the headliner, and they had the biggest party ever in Dallas, Texas, and
Wow.
they would do it at a ranch, and it became over time very quickly became the big fundraiser. So when I took it over, probably 20 years ago or 25 years ago, I did it for about 10 or 12 years. And I did Houston, which also has a cattle barons ball for
Hmm.
American Cancer. The last time I did cattle barons, I think we raised $4 million that night. But I've worked with all the major stars from Toby Keith to Dwight Yoakam and you name a country star. Pretty much everybody that's a headliner. I think Post Malone played it last year. So, I mean, they always bring in big entertainment. They pay them a lot of money to come, but they've got a lot of money to spend. So
Yep.
I think the cost of that whole fundraiser today is it's $1 million to $2 million to just put on the show. But then
Right.
they're raising money with the silent auction, the live auction, and then they put on the concert. And they have two concerts. They have one on the auction stage, and then they have the headliner, which is always going to be the latest, whoever's the hottest. Everybody,
Yeah.
everybody that's anybody plays cattle barons. I've also done, I work for the U.S. Olympic Committee. Um,
Wonderful.
there is a whole world of auctioneers that specialize in benefit fundraising auctions. I carry the BAS designation, which is Benefit Auction Specialist through the
Oh, wow.
National Auction Association. I trained for it. But I worked for an auctioneer in the early 80s, 79, 80, 81, 82. He taught me the fundraising business, and he is like the master. Joe Small was the guy that gave me my first job in Dallas. He was the first guy that took on fundraising, and he is the master. He was the master. He's deceased now, but he was like a dad to me, and taught at our school, and he's the guy that taught the industry how to make money in the auction business, raising money for charity events. And we're not saying charge to raise money for a sick child or anything like that. We're talking about, or your church, you want to work for your church, or you have a special thing that you want to raise money for. That's your business. But if you're going to go out, if they're paying the band, they're paying the caterer, they're paying the hotel, they're paying stupid money for this, that, and the other thing, and it's a private school, there's no reason why we can't get paid. We're the guys that actually create the money. We're the men
Of
and
course.
women
Yeah.
who raise the money. They give you the ability to do all this stuff. So it's a
Absolutely.
combination. It's the auctioneer, the assets that you have, and marketing and making sure the people with the money are in the seats.
That's right. That's right. Well,
Yeah.
this podcast would not be complete if we didn't talk about the chant.
Yes.
How do you develop a chant? What makes a good chant?
Well, what starts a chant is learning the basics. Every auction school starts the same, and that's with tongue twisters. So we start with tongue twisters like rubber baby buggy bumper. We'll go rubber baby buggy bumper, rubber baby buggy bumper. Tommy Atadavus stick two T's, Tom to the top of two tall trees. Tommy Atadavus stick two T's, Tom to the top of two tall trees. Betty bought some butter, but she said this butter's bitter. If I put it in my batter, it will make my batter bitter. So she bought a bit of better butter, put it in her bitter batter, made her bitter batter better. So just better. Betty bought a bit of better butter. That is the hops right there. And then there's some others. We got a lot of 66 sailors sailed the Mississippi in 1666. 66 sailors sailed the Mississippi in 1666. Then we get into numbers and we start 1 to 100 and back, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 40. Just all these numbers, 10, 10, 20, 20, 30, 30, 40, 40, 50, 50, 60, 60. We get up to 90, 90. Then we go 90, 90, 80, 80, 70, 70, 60, 60, 50, 50, 40, 40, 30, 30, 20, 20, 10, 10. I don't have to think about it. It's embedded in my brain. Good auctioneers never have to think about the next number. That's the key too. You have to have your numbers down memorized to where you never have to think about it. And then you just work on repetition. And it takes a little time. You know, it's not, you don't come to auction school and walk out a champion. You may be the rookie champion, but you're not going to be the champion that you need. Most champion auctioneers, world auto auctioneer champions. We just had that contest in Memphis last week. friend of mine. I know all the guys that are in the contest pretty much. Most of those guys have been in the business 10 to 20 years before they win the international or the World Auto Auction Championship or the World Cattle. Usually 8 to 10. I think I won the international after 8. It was my 8th time to do it. And that's kind of normal, but you have to master your craft. It's just like singing on stage. You got to be a natural to do it. At a certain point, it needs to look flawless, effortless, and you just look, suave and cool. And if you can do that with confidence and personality, you've got to turn it on when you got to turn it on. I used to do about 150 fundraisers a year. Now I do probably 5 or 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what does it take? What are the judges looking for? You said you were the 1998 international champion.
I've been the
What did it
chairman
take
for
to
that
get?
contest. I've judged every major contest in the United States and in Ireland and in South Africa. I've judged their contest. So I know a little bit about contests. I can put one on.
Yeah.
It's all about clarity, speed. Number one is, in my opinion, clarity. I want to be able to understand what the hell they're saying, because if you can't,
Fair
I'm not going
enough.
to bid, right? If I can't understand what you're saying, I'm not bidding. If you're going to be a champion auctioneer, I would say the key is practice, 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 practice. We preach that, and people. I think people want a magic bullet. They want to go to auction school and be a champion auctioneer. Well, that's all good and fine. The real champion auctioneers work at it every single day. I mean, literally every single day. If you listen to their speeches when they win, we just had a guy from here in Texas win the World Auto Auction Championship. Well, he's been an auctioneer for 20 years.
Yeah.
And he's a great auctioneer. He's won everything else, just like my partner has. He has won every auction contest there is, except for the international championship. And he really wants to win it. He's roughly, I don't know, probably 50 years old. But he came to my auction school when he was 18 years old.
Wow.
And he's won every competition he's ever gotten into. But the international has eluded him. It's almost like being a great football player. And I mean, being on a division winner for 10 years and lose right before the Super Bowl cut, right? And I've known those guys, and I've worked with a lot of professional athletes in these fundraisers. That's the other thing. When you do fundraisers, you deal with professional athletes. Training is everything. A guy that has been Emmitt Smith's manager is a really good friend of mine. In fact, I'm having lunch with him Monday. He's a big marketing specialist with Coca-Cola and all these major companies. But he would always tell me what all Emmitt was doing. I said, "Well, where's Emmitt today?" He's prepping. He was always prepping. He was always, but see, it's just like the main thing about this business, there's two sides of it. You have the contract auctioneer who goes and works for an auto auction or a cattle auction. And then there's the guy or the gal who owns their own company. That's two different people. That's an entrepreneur. Yeah. So you've got to decide, if you're going to get in this business, do you want to be a bid caller or do you want to be a business owner? And that's a big difference. And
right.
So I think that, and I'm really good at helping people decide what they want to do. I think that's one of the things I can do for an individual. I had a gentleman one day call. He had finished auction school with me back in, I think it was 96. And probably the late 90s. He goes, "Can I meet with you?" And I said, "Sure." And we met after school, probably 2 weeks later. He said, "I'm trying to figure out what I should do with my career." He said, "I finished auction school. I've always wanted to do that." But he said, "I'm trying to figure out how I can make a living." I said, "Well, I got a great idea." I said, "I can tell you what I would do." I said, "What I would do, because I've already done it. I've been there, done it. I've got the ring, literally. And, I can't, I can't start over, right? I'm not going to start over. I mean, but I know what I would do." I said, "There's 2 or 3 companies that are they're the largest, most successful dealer auto auctions in the United States. 2 specifically. It was Mannheim and Odessa. Mannheim's out of Pennsylvania. They're the world's largest auto auction company. I said, I want to be number 3. I said, I would start an auto auction company, and my whole goal was to be 3rd, because if you build it, they will come. Kind of like what Avis did. We're number 2, but we try harder.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, it's a true story. So this guy here in Dallas starts this company called America's Auto Auction. And he built it up over the last 20 years. And he just cashed out about 2 or 3 years ago, made an unbelievable amount of money, super successful.
Yeah.
Now it's in new hands. He's a young man. He's not an old guy. He's probably in his 40s, early 50s. He's got a whole life ahead of him. And I don't know what he's going to do with the rest of his life, but the world is your oyster if you put your mind to business. I watched. I'm a big fan of Warren Buffett. We don't necessarily agree on politics, but we certainly agree on business. And I thought one thing he said, there's like 5 things that he believes that you have to do to be successful in life. And number one, of course, is having your money make money for you instead of you owing money. He believes that you can owe money, but you got to get out of debt as quick as you can, and then you've got to accumulate wealth, and then you make it pay for future opportunities. But his attitude was very clear. The decisions you make, this was very telling. The decisions you make in your 30s will define what you have when you're older. Period.
Yeah. Yeah.
What you do, who you're with, who you marry.
Yes.
All these things are true. And if you do it, if you pick right, if you do those things correctly in your 30s, because if you do them wrong, then you're probably going to be paying for your mistakes in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. But I've never heard truer words spoken, and I'm a product of that. And I didn't always make the best decisions in the world. I've been very, very blessed and fortunate, and God's taken care of an idiot. But I'm here. And so anyway, no, I thought that was a great analogy. I think it's really just a great idea.
Well, Mike, how can people find out more about you and about your schools?
Sure. For auction school, if they'd like to come to auction school, they need to go to auctionacademy.com. Super simple.
Simple enough.
Auctionacademy.com. And you can go to that website, and it will give you the opportunity if you want to go to auction school. Our schools are listed there. And then we also have continuing education programs that we're offering, and a VIP program where we actually manage auctioneer licenses. So if you have licenses in 15 states, we will actually handle the approvals, line you up for your continuing education. We're kind of a manager of licenses, which has never been done before. So we're doing that. If you want to check me out personally, you literally can go to my new website, and you can click on past auctions, and it will take you. You have a choice. It starts at 1979. You can click on every auction that I've ever conducted up till now, and it's Mike Jones Auction Group.com. Mike Jones Auctiongroup.com. The website came out just this past year, and we're getting ready. You'll see a lot of things. There'll be some video, and also my previous calendar is pretty. It's pretty neat to go back and see the very first auction I ever did, and then what happened over time. And then you could put in 2002 and see the trend, just the change. It's humbling actually to look at it. And of course, from an auctioneer standpoint, I remember every sale I ever did. That's what's amazing.
Wow.
It's the fun part. So anyway, that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Great. Well, Mike Jones, it's been a pleasure and honor to have you on the show.
Well, Mark, it is. I tell you what, I really enjoyed being on your show, and I look forward to seeing it, and I look forward to promoting it, and I hope everybody will watch it, and you might learn a little bit about the auction business and a little bit about me as well. So I've had a great career, and I appreciate it. It's been a fun life.
All Across America is produced by me, Marco Vig, in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Visit us on Instagram at All Across America. Check out our website, allacrossamerica.com. There's an interactive map with all our episodes, and there's a Contact Us page where you can send your reactions, guest ideas, and suggestions. So get in touch, stay connected. To me, that's what podcasting is all about. Thanks for listening.